Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Incorporated, in association with Road to Perdition writer Max Allan Collins, presents True Noir, the Nathan Heller Casebooks, an audio drama, totally immersive, starring Captain Todd Stashwick. You knew him as Liam Shaw in Picard Season 3 and Deacon in 12 Monkeys. He's playing Nathan Heller. We're crowdfunding this. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be 8 hours long. Max Allan Collins is writing it. It's an all-SAG production with all SAG actors, and we're needing your help to get it done. I'll tell you more about it later. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course the maybe never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm of course Robcasting at you right here from the Robservatory. I gotta tell you, I've been cleaning it up, but this is Robservations episode number 930. For all of you keeping score out there, which, you know, I hope you are, because I looked it up. There's like 100 days until my birthday. And there's 70 episodes till we get to episode 1000. So my birthday is May 15th. So I'm going to try and plan my stream for my birthday. Or not. I don't know. I'm going to try to do it for my birthday. People want to take me out for my birthday. I don't know. Maybe on my birthday might not be, but it's going to be around there. Because I'm pre-recording interviews. I'm doing all kinds of things. And it's going to be a 1,000-minute show, which is more than 16 hours long. For those of you who watch this channel for any length of time, you know I used to do that. Milestone shows used to be long. They were fun. It was a fun, mirth-filled. This one's going to be fun. This is going to be the biggest show. I'm going to have live guests, pre-recorded guests. Anybody who wants to show up, we'll have randos. We might have some randos tonight. I was thinking about it. So for those of you who don't know, if you've ever wanted to come on the show, people are always yelling at me and, you know, they're always calling me out for things, and I'm like, well, if you want to, if you don't like my takes, or you want to tell me I'm a shitheel, whatever you want to do, sometimes you can come on the show if you want. So tonight might be one of those nights where I'm going to randomly, I don't know yet, I haven't decided yet, I'll have to see how it goes, but I put the link in the live chat, and if you've got a camera and a microphone, I'll let you on live. Who knows what happens? It's all kinds of crazy when that happens. But anyway, I'm sure you all saw it. I'm sure you've all been thinking about it. Or maybe not. Who knows? I don't know. But George R.R. Martin's comments about anti-fans. Now, I like that term, you know, anti, like, you know, first thing comes to mind, anti-Christ. So anti-fans are kind of anti-Christ-like. I don't know if that's the implication. Well, what was really interesting, if you do a cursory Google search, there's a show in Korea called I Married an Anti-Fan. And then you find out there's a whole area of study in academia about anti-fandom. And it's interesting. I did not know that. And there was all kinds of things about what does it mean to be an anti-fan. And I started reading a lot about it. A lot of the academic journals, which there was one, I have to buy it. The thing about academic books that are like published by universities that are studies, they're hideously expensive. I was actually interviewed for a book on fandom, an academic book called Seeing Fans. Really, actually, a pretty good book, but the hardcover is like $150 or something because it's an academic book, so they can jack up the price. But I found a really interesting book that I want to buy. I'll buy it. I don't have a Kindle. I like to read things physically, but I was like, couldn't get it by today. But there's all kinds of books about anti-fans. And, we, all of us, if you're watching me now, you're a citizen of the internet. And you watch a lot of internet dissertation, which, by the way, is where all the great dissertation's going on. Conversation, these long-form conversations, legacy media can't do that. It's only happening on the internet. That's why Joe Rogan blew up. Joe Rogan what is he doing? He's having long-form conversations with the people. And Joe Rogan is basically us. He is the everyman. Yes, I know he's an MMA fighter, and I know he hosts comedy, and I know he's been on TV. But he's as close to an everyman as you can pretty much come, even though he's now a very wealthy everyman. But he asks the questions that we would ask. And I think he's a great proxy for us, the audience. I've heard that his Spotify deal is no longer just exclusive to Spotify, because Spotify, obviously, like a lot of these internet companies, which is really sad, those the gold rush days seem to be over. But I don't think Joe Rogan is going anywhere. But either way, the idea of anti-fandom has been something that I'd never really heard that term. But let me first read what George R. R. Martin said. Now, this Deadline picked up the story, which was originally on Variety. Now, I went to look up George R. R. Martin's original blog, but it doesn't seem to be there. I couldn't link to it. Maybe other people can. I don't know why I was having a problem. But maybe you took it down because you couldn't deal with the backlash. So this Bruce Herring wrote this today in Deadline, talking just about what George R. R. Martin said. And by the way, I want to preface this by saying I'm a huge George R. R. Martin fan, all the way back to the 80s. I used to have a signed hardcover. He wrote a great vampire on the Mississippi novel called Fever Dream, and which I loved. And then, of course, he also started the Wild Cards series of what they called mosaic novels. And for those of you who don't know, so in the Wild Cards series that he edited, which is, I think it's like 20 volumes deep now, it started out as a collection of, the premise was there are superheroes and there are supervillains in this world. And the heroes are called aces, and the villains are called jokers. And what happened was an alien named Dr. Tachyon came to Earth and said, look, my race is going to test detonate a pathogen over one of your cities. And they tried to stop it. And there was a World War II ace named Jet Boy that tried to stop this thing from happening, but it gets detonated across New York City. And basically, it's like a mutagen kind of a virus where it affects people differently. So the aces, people that were affected and beneficially, they were called aces, and then the people that were affected adversely were called jokers. And you never knew it was going to happen. You might become a horrible mutant or somebody like the Thing, or you might become like Superman. And then he had different science fiction writers write different stories about different characters that they had created all under the umbrella of this world. And it started out as a fictional history, and this thing was test detonated over New York at the end of World War II. So it was it was an alternative history of humanity from the end of World War II forward. And I highly recommend it. It is wildly entertaining. I once pitched it to a producer. I pitched it actually to David Kirshner once, a long time ago when I first got to California. And he was interested in it, but back then nobody could see superheroes done in sort of a very more of a serious way, but it had cool things in it, like Jim Morrison, the Lizard King. He could actually turn into a lizard on stage and mesmerize the audience. So it was stuff like that, which I loved. So I loved stories like Sand Kings that was adapted for the 90s Outer Limits, the Pendentium Outer Limits. I've always been a fan of George R. R. Martin. Of course, he worked on the Beauty and the Beast TV series with Linda Hamilton and Ron Perlman, which was a great show. So he cut his teeth on that. I believe he wrote for the mid-'80s Twilight Zone as well. So anyway, big fan of George R. R. Martin, way before Game of Thrones. But I loved Game of Thrones. So what George R. R. Martin said, so this Bruce Herring wrote this in Deadline today. George R. R. Martin laments the passing of rational discourse on film, music, and books via social media. George R. R. Martin no longer finds the fun in debating about books, movies, and TV. He blames social media for a toxicity that stifles any dissent. The author behind the books that became the TV series Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, Martin lamented the passing of rational discourse on his blog. Martin said he would typically take his mind off the real world's troubles with fictional stories found in books, movies, and television shows, and now he said people celebrate failures rather than great work. Well, I take solace where I can, Martin said, in books, in films, and television shows. Though even there, toxicity is growing. It used to be fun talking about our favorite books and films and having spirited debates with fans who saw things different. But somehow, in this age of social media, it is no longer enough to say, I did not like book X or film Y, and here's why. Now social media is ruled by anti-fans who would rather talk about the stuff they hate than the stuff they love, and delight in dancing on the graves of anyone whose film has flopped. So that's what he said. Respectfully, George, I would like to disagree with you. And I would say this. Obviously, there is a lot of rhetoric that is running around the internet. People are angry, people are mad, people are always talking about how much this sucks and how much that sucks and why they hate this and why they hate that. And I get it because it's true. and I think, and I, of course, get pilloried for some of the company that I keep because of the way people don't like the way certain individuals on the internet talk about things. But be that as it may, we're all talking about the same thing. And I think I want to go back and I want to set the stage here. And I want to use myself as a prototypical fan. So as many people know who've watched this channel for a long time, my fandom, I don't know why it started. Why is anybody interested in anything? But from the time I was 5 years old, and that's when I remember it. I don't remember much about my life before I was 5 years old, to be honest. But when I was 5 years old, there was a confluence of events. Somehow when I was 5, I was a very early reader. I learned to read at a very early age, and I loved books. I love reading, and I love being read too. So I loved stories, and it started with books, but then obviously TV shows and all that. And when I was a kid, when I was 5 years old, I discovered Star Trek. And I also discovered Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits and the Irwin Allen shows like Land of the Giants and Time Tunnel and those kind of Lost in Space, all that stuff, because it was all on the same channel. When I was growing up in Seattle, Channel 11. Then we had Channel 13, but Channel 11 was there first. And all this stuff was on Channel 11. So I knew Channel 11 and I would watch things and I would discover them. And I also had, like I've said, my mom used to get these just unbelievably hot babysitters. And the babysitters that somehow they knew things, they knew shows, because they were babysitters, they were used to staying up late and watching stuff, and they look at the TV guide. I don't know, but I had all these babysitters that knew when movies like Don't Be Afraid of the Dark were going to be on. And they would let me, my parents were coming home late. They'd be like, oh, you got to watch this movie. Because they wanted to torture me and scare a little kid. They didn't know that I love this stuff. So I was down for it. And So I became a fan at a very early age. And being a fan in the 70s was amazing. First of all, the stuff that I hadn't seen before, all of it was great. Whether it was black and white Universal monster movies, and I would watch anything to do with science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And I'll tell you something. I mean, when I say everything, it was everything. And when I watched it, I was not discerning. If there was a spaceship in it, I would watch it. If there was a monster in it, I would watch it. And I didn't know whether it was good or bad. I maybe knew if I was bored. But if I knew that there was the possibility that a spaceship or a monster or an astronaut or a kaiju, whatever it was, I would sit there. If I had to sit there for an hour before I got some anything that was remotely monsterific, I would wait. And I would wait patiently. And even if I got like one monster, like it was the best. And then sometimes I would find things like I was 5 years old when I saw War of the Worlds for the first time. Byron Askin's War of the Worlds from 1953, which, by the way, for the very longest time, until I saw Star Wars 5 years later. So for half of my life, from the time I was 5 years old to the time I was 10 and saw Star Wars, for 50% of my life, Byron Haskin's War of the Worlds was the greatest movie I'd ever seen. And I've told this story before, but I remember going to my grandmother's sister lived in Gearhart, Oregon, which is right next to Cannon Beach. And we'd go down there for the summer. Not for the whole summer. We'd just go down there and visit and hang out for like a week. And I remember it took me like 3 hours to explain all of War of the Worlds to my grandmother on the way down. And she would indulge me. So she listened to me. I can't believe the patience of a saint. She must have been bored to tears. But she listened to me, and I told her single detail I could remember about War of the Worlds, which I thought was the greatest thing in the world because it started. My best friend, Jeff Swafford, was Catholic, and the aliens fry a priest. I mean, for me, the most transgressive thing I'd ever seen in my life when I was 5 years old was the fact that the Martians fried a priest. And the priest was saying the Lord's Prayer, lo, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, or whatever. They fried him anyway. And at 5 years old, I'm like, I mean, I was already going to Sunday school. I'd gone to church with my friend Jeff, because he'd come to temple. I'd go to church, and I loved churches because if there were priests there, that meant vampires couldn't have been far away. Because there was always, you always had to have religious people. That's if there were priests, there were vampires. So I love priests because it meant monsters lurked. I didn't know that they were sometimes monsters themselves at the point. I was 5. What do you want? But it was awesome that a priest got fried by the Martians, because I was like, that meant shit was going to go down. It was going down, and it did. The monsters came out of the gulch, in their Martian war machine. First of all, you have to understand that when you're 5 years old, you're looking for anything that's cool. And when I was 5 years old, there was nothing, and I mean this sincerely, the coolest thing in the world were the Martian war machines in War of the Worlds. The sounds they made. I mean, if you go back and you listen, even now, boom, 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 and then I can't even do it with my mouth, but when they finally use their heat ray, nothing was cooler than the Martian war machines. And when you finally saw the Martians, they were truly alien, and they were the best. And so it was instilled in me immediately that movies about aliens were awesome. They were awesome. There was never in my mind, and by the way, that was true all the time. And I watched some pretty shitty movies, I have to say. Great movie title, terrible movie, but it stars Michael Gough as the Moon Master. There was a movie, I kid you not, called They Came from Beyond Space. And it was like, you could tell it was like a Quatermass ripoff. Like, I look, give me Quatermass, give me British sci-fi. There was so many great 20 million years, 20 million years to Earth? Quatermass and the Pits or whatever, or was that? I don't even remember. I'm a little confused right now. But there was so many great. I would even watch Reptilicus, and Reptilicus was terrible, but I loved it. I loved it. See, when you're a kid, you're just happy to see anything. And then, as I got older, and I started to go to the movies and see movies in the theater, things just got better. Logan's Run, 1976. When you're 9 years old and you see Logan's Run in a theater, there's nothing better. There's boobs. And by that time, I was interested in boobs. You saw boobs. They went into a love shop. I didn't actually understand what kind of happened in the love shop, but they went through it, and I was like, wow. And my mom took me to see this. Same year, John Gillerman's King Kong came out. When my Kong die, everybody cry. That was Dino De Laurentiis, terrible impression, but it was Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange. I mean, come on. This was in the theater. Like, I didn't sit there, and I was not sitting there going, I wasn't comparing and contrasting, the original King Kong from the 30s with John Gillerman's King Kong in the 70s. It's been 40 years. It didn't matter. It was awesome. Kong climbing up, the military shooting at him. The Petrox Explorer. Charles Grodin is the captain of that ship. Didn't bother me. I loved it. I loved Herbie the Love Bug. I loved all the I didn't sit there and go, Herbie Rides Again or Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. Let's talk about how much better or worse they are than the original Herbie the Love Bug. As long as I got Dean Jones or like Suzanne Plachette, it didn't matter. The Apple Dumpling Gang, Treasure of Matacumbe, Island at the Top of the World. I would go see anything, and I loved it all. There was nothing. Jaws when I was 8. Come on. I mean, first PG movie I ever saw, Land That Time Forgot. There was nothing that wasn't great. Everything was awesome. And I watched The Twilight Zone, and, it was great. And here's the thing that I think people forget, and it plays into this whole anti-fandom thing. Then, I'm 9 years old, clicks over to 1977. What do I get in 1977? Obviously, we got Star Wars. I've talked about it ad infinitum, whatever. Everyone loved it. There was nothing like that before. It changed the world. Changed movies. This is the coolest thing ever. Greatest thing ever made. 6 months later, what happens? Close Encounters. 1-2 punch. Then, right after Star Wars came out, you know what else happened? I was a huge James Bond fanatic. I'd never seen a James Bond movie in a movie theater. My first James Bond movie in a movie theater, Spy Who Loved Me. James Bond returns to widescreen adventure after being flat. It was say it with me now. Dr. No from Russia with Love and Goldfinger were flat. Then they became widescreen epics with Thunderball. Then with the Roger Moore movies, they scaled it back, and Live and Let Die and Mouth of Golden Gun were flat. They were I think they were 166. They might be 185. I don't remember. But then they went back to the epic widescreen for Spy Who Loved Me, and I saw that in the theater. I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's my favorite Roger Moore Bond film. I'm seeing this in the theater. And so the point I'm trying to make is that everything was awesome. Now, I hadn't yet figured out that the James Bond franchise was not always awesome. For me, it didn't matter whether I was watching From Russia with Love, which is probably closest to Fleming's novels, or whether I was watching Man with a Golden Gun. It didn't matter. Or Diamonds Are Forever, Double, not so great. Spy Who Loved Me, fantastic. But for the most part, I just love James Bond. And then after Star Wars came out, it was just Superman the movie in 78. 79, I got to see things like Phantasm and Dawn of the Dead. Of course, we got Alien. Even the Black Hole in Star Trek The Motion Picture. Even the Black Hole, goofy as it was, loved it. Big widescreen, epic Disney shit. And then after that, 80, Empire Strikes Back. 81, Superman 2. 81, Dragon Slayer, Raiders, For Your Eyes Only, Clash of the Titans, which isn't very good, but I loved it anyway. All in 81. Then 82, my God. 82. 82, we got everything. The space of 3 months. Whether it's Conan the Barbarian or The Road Warrior or Tron or Blade Runner or Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, E.T., Poltergeist, Megaforce. That kind of sucked, I guess. But I wasn't expecting it to be great. But so... And then all through the 80s, we got pretty much greatness. I mean, whether it was stuff like Reanimator or Back to the Future or Highlander. I mean, take your pick, Temple of Doom. I mean, the 80s were great. I mean, I will say that I've talked to people about how Return of the Jedi is the most disappointing movie I ever saw in my life, but I know other people love it. But still, it wasn't until the summer of 1989 that for me as a diehard fan, I pretty much was riding the fan media bandwagon, where even when stuff wasn't very good, I still loved it. I hadn't had any crushing disappointments yet. I hadn't been disillusioned. I hadn't had something come out and go, man, that sucked, or I hated that, because I would give things a pass, even if it was the remnants of my little kiddom, my little kid attitude that would stick around. And I'm like, it was just pretty good. If it had monsters, if it had aliens, that was pretty much it. Or boobs, pretty much. I'd graduated to boobs too. I would stick around. I'd watch it, and for the most part, it was pretty good. Everything was pretty good. Books are great. The 80s were just great. Pop culture was great. Music was great. Movies were great. It was all pop culture. Comics were great. Everything I was reading, everything I was into, there was just a pantheon of awesome. And while some things weren't awesome, it was pretty great wherever you looked for a 10-year stretch. Now, I went from junior high to high school to college, and then I graduated from college in the late 80s and began working in motion pictures. Began 1989, worked on Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. This first movie I worked on as the art department production assistant. But for the most part, the 80s were pretty fucking spectacular. Pop culture was there for me. But the summer of 89. Summer of 89 had things in it. Like, I really liked Timothy Dalton in The Living Daylights. Now, I know some people are going to ding me for this because I don't know why. It's inexplicably people like this movie. But License to Kill came out. James Bond movie, License to Kill. They were going to call it License Revoked after the John Gardner novel, but nobody knew what revoked meant. Or at least that's the apocryphal story I've heard. So License to Kill came out. I'm like, what the fuck is this? It was a James Bond movie. I didn't dig it. Now, you know what? That just reminded me. I think the first time, actually, let me go take it back to 85. The first time I saw something that really disappointed me after Return of the Jedi was A View to a Kill. Now, I was a Bond apologist. As long as I was watching some Bond, I was good. I hated A View to a Kill. I reviewed it for my high school newspaper. I had a column called Real Life, REEL. And I didn't like it. It was boring. And I thought the set pieces were lame. I thought pretty much the whole movie was lame. Except Duran Duran's theme song, which was still great to even today. But I didn't like it. And I remember thinking, wow, that's... And I got excited for every Bond film. Octopussy came out close to the end of the school year. Went and saw that. Same theater I saw Empire Strikes Back and stuff at, the UI-150. But I didn't like View to a Kill. And that was the first time I was like, huh. And I was perplexed that they made a movie, like a Bond movie, that was so kind of lame. And I didn't understand how that happened. I was like, these people have been making James Bond movies for over 20 years. How could they make this? I remember thinking that, but it didn't matter. That was the summer of Back to the Future. There was plenty of great stuff that had come out and was coming out. 85 was a good year. Reanimator was 85. I think it was maybe it was 86. But a lot of good stuff coming out still. So it didn't bother me. There was little bumps in the road, but I didn't get angry about it. I mean, hey, we had Grace Jones. That was pretty cool. Mayday. There was things there was a blimp. I like blimps. Christopher Walken was over the top. But a fire engine chase. Bond gets stuck in an elevator. Tanya Roberts. It was not good. But in 89, we also got Ghostbusters 2, and I don't care. I will die on this hill. It was not good. If you watch Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2 back to back, it is an incredible step down. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade came out. Didn't dig it. The B team at ILM was churning out really substandard effects. I thought it was silly. It didn't have the right balance. It was too much of a comedy. Sure, Sean Connery was great. I love Sean Connery, but I didn't like Last Crusade. I thought it was my least favorite of the Indiana Jones movies. I know some people are like, I love it. Everyone loves the comedy and the fun of it. It was a joke. You go all the way to Berlin for one, Hitler signs his Grail diary. I didn't like that. And then, of course, Star Trek V. Directed by the mighty Shatner himself. It had problems. I didn't love it. And and then, of course, we did get Tim Burton's Batman, and I'm going to be honest. Tim Burton's Batman, the hype was unreal. But when I saw it, and I still feel this way, I felt it was really fun to watch. I just felt it was lethargic. It never got a head of steam up. And I can appreciate it from what Tim Burton was trying to do. I just didn't think it was a particularly great movie. I was disappointed by that. And that was the biggest movie of the summer of '89. So, for the very first time, I was rather disillusioned with the state of all of my favorite things. A Batman movie, an Indiana Jones movie, a Star Trek movie, a James Bond movie, and even Ghostbusters. I really liked the first one, and the second one kind of let me down. I thought it was cheap. You know, they switched from 65 millimeter visual effects done by Boss Film and Richard Edlund. They went back to ILM, and it felt like, again, ILM was way too busy, you know, and the effects they were churning out were, in my mind, substandard. The effects in Ghostbusters are terrible, and the effects in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade were terrible. They were way overextended. And that was disappointing. So I didn't like it. And I think the summer of '89 was the first time I had an inkling of what it meant to be an anti-fan. And I didn't like myself. Let's see what you guys are saying quickly. I will jump into any super chats real fast. Sadhu says both Argyle and Aquaman 2 were gobbledygook films. Yep. I haven't seen Argyle, but Aquaman 2 certainly. Kenneth Crayley Jr. says, Rob, now that Superman and Lois is ending with season 4, what do you think the legacy of the show will be for the DC TV Arrowverse and superhero TV in general? Well, I thought it was a pretty strong show. I think the great legacy of Superman and Lois is that they were able to do something that was inherently interesting. The big problem with Superman on the big screen is, who does he fight? You got to give him an enemy. Who does he fight? I mean, he can't get into fisticuffs with Luthor. All he can do is respond to Luthor's evil. And that becomes, a little tiresome. It doesn't really work. And we want to see Superman face a foe that he can take on mano a mano. And then when he finally does that, like with Zod in Man of Steel, people get mad because the reality of two Kryptonians fighting over an urban environment would cause the deaths of tens of thousands of people. And then Superman is in a fight for his life. They don't just take away his powers and he slides down some ice into oblivion. And then people get mad. So making a Superman movie with a formidable adversary is a very difficult thing to do. Very difficult thing to do. But Superman being a father, that was inherently interesting. Doesn't matter how good he is, how smart he is, how powerful he is. It doesn't help him be a better dad. And I thought that's what kept the show great. And I love that. So I thought that was pretty good. So, Geekin' with James Hancock sends in a $20 super chat. Says, heading to CinemaCon in Vegas for the first time this year. Any advice on how to maximize the experience? Yeah, plan your day. I mean, plan your day because there's different events that you can go to, and it depends. Like, a lot of people just want to go to the presentations that the studios give and watch that stuff. But I'm interested in technology, and I like to talk to a lot of people there. So I like to go in the display areas and things like that. But plan your day because the schedule's out. You can see the schedule. You can plan what you want to do. And then just get to the presentations a little early. Usually a half an hour, 45 minutes early, so you can get in line. There's never a problem getting in, but you want to get good seats. So Scott Edwards says, what rating do you give Marvels out of 10? 5. I thought it was a really wasted opportunity. I really did. I thought it was unfortunately, kind of a wasted opportunity, which kind of bummed me out. 1001 Johnny sent in 3 tips. He says, on a historic day, which is commemorated by my species and fully documented in the Sacred Scrolls, there came Aldo. He did not grunt, he articulated. He spoke a word which had been spoken to him without number by humans. He said, no. Dr. Otto Hesslein, with the U.S. president, how many futures are there? Which future has God? If there is a God chosen for man's destiny? If I urge the destruction of these two apes, am I defying God's will or obeying it? Am I his enemy or his instrument? An assassin would say the latter. Do you approve of assassination? Well, we condone the attempted assassination of Hitler because he was evil, yes. But would we have approved killing him in babyhood when he was still innocent? Or killing his mother when 1001 Johnny is asking questions that the Planet of the Apes movies brought up? Dr. Otto Hesslein. I wonder if Hasslein's theory is correct. I loved those are from the latter Planet of the Apes movies, Escape and Conquest, and I love those movies. And those are other things that I really, really, really liked. So we'll see. I can't wait. But anyway, so now I've sort of caught up, but I want to get back into this anti-fans thing. So, in the wake of Star Wars, there was an explosion of fantasy cinema. And we did get things like everything from Alien to Back to the Future, from Blade Runner to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. You know, we got all kinds, the studios were making all kinds of crazy stuff that were brought to you by world-class filmmakers. And the thing was, for the most part, all of it was good. Even when a relatively new director like Russell Mulcahy took on, who was a music video director, he'd made a movie called Razorback in Australia. When he did Highlander, he combined music video, Queen, music video, MTV stylings with a great story about an immortal flashing back in his life. You know, Connor McLeod of the Clan McLeod, the Kurgan. Even that was, the rock music. It was awesome. And John Hughes movies, you know, whether it was 16 Candles or Ferris Bueller or Breakfast Club. I mean, everything that we were getting was a whole lot of fun, and it was just a wide variety of subject matter. And the filmmakers were they all had things they wanted to do, and they went out and did it. And everything we got was pretty interesting because the filmmakers, it was populist filmmaking, but it was a lot of fun. Even Coppola, when he was adapting S.E. Hinton's novels back in 82 and 83, you got The Outsiders and Rumblefish. You got a very, very honest, very earnest adaptation, and then you got this sort of art film. So he was adapting two S.E. Hinton novels, and one was traditional and one was just an incredible vision. Stuart Copeland from The Police was scoring it, and you had Stanner Widgway and Wall of Voodoo, maybe just Stanner Widgway singing Don't Box Me In as the theme song. I mean, everything we were getting was really, really interesting. Now, what does this have to do with the anti-fan? And why would I'll flat out say this, I should be considered an anti-fan. I become one. And I become one for a very simple reason. And I think why everybody is now being an anti-fan, and there's a lot of anger on the internet with a lot of different things. It is because the stuff that we grew up with, that even when it was a misfire, like Star Trek V, at least Shatner was making what he wanted to make. He was making the story he wanted to make, and the movie, while sometimes I think his choices were wrong-headed, what happened to that movie that I think really hurt it was two different things. One, he had to embrace humor, so the tone is all over the place, because Star Trek IV was funny, and it made the most money of any Star Trek movie, so hey, let's lean into the humor, even though he was trying to tell a very philosophical and heartfelt story. Two, he went with Bran Farron instead of ILM that had done the previous 4 Star Trek movies. Well, had done the previous 3, hadn't done motion picture, but because they tried to save money, and Bran Farron's company wasn't up to the task. So he got fucked there. And the movie went over budget, and they wouldn't give him the budget to make the end of the movie proper. So the end of the movie's really lame. So you have goofy humor. You don't have a satisfying conclusion because they didn't shoot the ending that was written. And it's it's a bummer, but it wasn't for lack of trying. And so Shatner was able to realize his vision to the extent that he could. But it wasn't something that was compromised by somebody trying to shove something in the story that shouldn't have been there, or trying to emulate something somewhere else. And the stories weren't compromised. And I think what was different then, up until, to be honest, the last 10 years, the stories for these movies and books and music and everything was pretty much, we were getting the vision of an artist or the vision of a filmmaker. And even the studios, when the studios were making money, the studios were not, they were doing what they did was they found great people. They would greenlight projects that people would bring them and let those filmmakers go off and make their movies, as long as they stayed within budget and within reason. Now, the big difference is there are two things. One, movies were made for the domestic market. They were not made for the globe. And movies cost a lot less. So movies were not $100 million movies. We saw the very first $100 million movie in 1991, and that was Terminator 2. Part of the reason it was so expensive was they had to figure out how to do the T-1000, but it was also had an accelerated production schedule, so they had to throw a lot of money at it, a lot of overtime on that movie. So it was very expensive. The first $100 million movie, but worth it. It was the biggest grossing movie of 1991. So, cut to now. Why are so many people angry about the things that we're getting? Why did I choose to use Sheev Palpatine on the cover of my thumbnail for tonight's episode? Why did I do that? Well, I think what's happened to our franchises is very simple. They're not good. I mean, what's happened is they're not, like I always say, never put your universe before your characters and stories. Never put your agenda or your message before your characters and stories. Well, that's happened in the last 10 years. That's demonstrably true. I mean, whether you're talking about whatever DEI initiatives you're talking about, a friend of mine sent me, IATSE's doing a DEI seminar. And, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this has infected this kind of thinking because we were on a good path. The world was on a good path. As far as DEI was concerned, it was happening organically. And as a matter of fact, I mean, our civilization was developing organically. And it was working. Same-sex marriage was the law of the land. And you had all kinds of acceptance that was happening naturally because it's the way human beings should be. We should be accepting, we should be tolerant, and we were on that path until about 12 years ago when there was a concerted, I'm not going to get into the hows and whys because it's still something I'm researching, but I want to do a whole expose about it anyway. But there was a concerted effort made on purpose to use certain elements that had been around, and like critical race theory had been around for a while, but it was a concerted effort to inject it into, especially America, and by certain forces for various reasons. It's not a conspiracy tinfoil hat thing. It just happened, and took over academia. And it is now spilled out all over the real world because people have graduated from colleges and now they're out in the workforce. And so that's just one aspect of it. What also happened is that you had big corporations buying or controlling franchises that used to be under the control of single or just a very few creative entities that were in charge of it. Like the most obvious being George Lucas in charge of Star Wars. And when he sold it to Disney, now you have a corporation. So I was talking about this on the Echo Base Network's podcast yesterday. It was really good. I suggest going back and watching it. I thought it was a very good podcast. Not just because I was on it, but I thought it was everyone made it a great podcast. So, and I was trying to explain this. when a corporation buys, say, an IP like Star Wars, Disney bought Pixar, Disney bought Star Wars, Disney bought Marvel. So Disney buys these big IPs that come with an expectation. And the expectation is Star Wars was one of the most lucrative entertainment franchises in the history of entertainment. And it had a merchandising component. I think when Disney bought Star Wars in 2012, Star Wars had sold like $22 billion worth of merchandise, which to me is a huge number, but it also seemed a little, I would have thought it would have been more, but around that one. So what happens when you're a corporation and you buy an asset is that you're going to exploit it the way you would exploit anything, a widget. Like when you buy Coca-Cola, I mean, Coca-Cola is its own company, but if you bought Coca-Cola, the world already knows what Coca-Cola is. So you pretty much know, like how much Coca-Cola is served at a movie theater, or how much Coca-Cola is served at a fast food establishment, or how much Coca-Cola is sold at various grocery stores around the world. So you know that your product, you can understand who you're selling to the world. But when a corporation buys Star Wars isn't Han, Luke, and Leia, R2-3PO, Lando, Chewie, Lobot. It's not that. It's a product. It's a brand name that has all these products underneath it that the corporation that bought it, Disney, wants to exploit and sell. What isn't part of that equation is the difference between good Star Wars and bad Star Wars. Because in a corporation's mind, that doesn't exist. Star Wars is what we're buying, and Star Wars has been a great brand since 1977. It's always been a good brand. It's always been selling, merchandising. People love it. So a corporation is not drilling down going, why is Luke the kind of character he is? Why is Han the kind of character he is? Why is Princess Leia spunky? The corporation that's not part of their thinking. They bought a brand, and they're going to exploit their brand, and they're going to use their marketing playbook that they can use for anything. And when you're at a studio, you never know if you're going to get a marketing executive that sold soft drinks or sold couches or whoever they were. And they're now going to sell Star Wars in all of its myriad forms, whether it's pajamas or bed linens or a Star Wars cruise or a Star Wars land, Star Wars toys, all this stuff. But a corporation doesn't know the difference between good Star Wars and bad. What they do is they hire people that they think it's their job to know what's good and bad Star Wars. So what they do then again is they look on a spreadsheet and they're like, who can we get to do this? And they're like, oh, okay. J.J. Abrams, he's made some good TV, made a lot of stuff that people like. Lost, Felicity, is that J.J. Abrams? All those kinds of TV shows, whether it was, take your pick, Person of Interest, all that stuff, Alias, right? So, and then of course Mission Impossible, and then they do the Star Trek movies. So on paper, J.J. Abrams is a force that, we got to get him to do Star Wars. That's perfect. Well, I would have disagreed, but I wasn't there. And I would say that I don't think he was. I don't think J.J. Abrams was perfect. Judging by his Star Trek movies, Star Trek in 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness, which I think is the most dunder-headed big-budget science fiction movie ever made. But that's just me. But anyway, he was picked. And another thing that I don't think that they really did was because storytelling itself, the idea and act of telling stories, is not something a corporation can do. That's what they hire people to do. And they hope they hire the right people. But there's nobody at Disney, believe it or not even Kathleen Kennedy, even though I think that they did have more of a plan for the Star Wars sequel trilogy than is normally given credit for these days. I think that Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker, which used to be called Duel of the Fates when Colin Trevorrow was going to do it, worked pretty well. It worked a lot better than what we got in Rise of Skywalker, which I didn't think a large budget science fiction movie could be more dunderheaded than Star Trek Into Darkness until I saw Rise of Skywalker. But a lot of that had extenuating circumstances, but still. But in the case of Star Wars, you have a corporation that now owns it that is using a spreadsheet to decide who should make it. Rather than sit down and go, okay, we've bought this property, and why it works and why it is the property that it is because of the stories, the timeless stories that were being told. So what we need to do is we need a plan. We need a plan so we are going to be able to tell the same stories, that we can hire people that tell the same stories. How are we going to make this plan? But here's the problem. There's no such thing in Hollywood as a plan, because everything is done one movie at a time. Now, people would say, well, Rob, what about Lord of the Rings? That's the only one. It's the only one. Bob Shea at New Line was smart, said, aren't there? They were going to make 2 Lord of the Rings movies. Miramax was going to make 2, then Miramax let it go. And then Bob Shea at New Line, Peter Jackson's Hail Mary, last meeting he had before he was going to go home and shut down pre-production on the Lord of the Rings movies, he met with Bob Shea, and lights come up after Peter Jackson makes his presentation. Bob Shea says, isn't there 3 Lord of the Rings novels? And they were off to the races. But the plan for the Lord of the Rings movies was in the books. And there was a fealty to the Lord of the Rings movies by not just Peter Jackson, Philippa Boyens, and Fran Walsh, but by the entire country of New Zealand. So everybody was behind it. They were going to make the best things they could, and lo and behold, they did, for a relatively cheap price as well. But that was because they were working off of a plan. No one in Hollywood ever does that. What do we got coming out in less than a month? We have Dune 2. Dune 2 is the second half of the book Dune. Dune is only the first half. Denis Villeneuve's Dune is only the first half. What fucking studio regime in this day and age, post Lord of the Rings, wants to make one half of Dune? I mean, they're going back to the same places. You're in the fucking desert. We're already in the desert. Why not amortize the cost and shoot the whole movie? Right? Do you know why they didn't? Too much of a risk. No one's going to... It's already a risk to spend $150, $200 million on a movie. You think that some studio executive in this day and age, with the shareholders the way they are, is going to be like, well, why don't we just shoot the whole thing and amortize the cost? It's a lot cheaper than if we filmed half the movie. But people are like, well, what if it fails? What if Denis Villeneuve fails? Well, here's the thing about him. Blade Runner 2049 wasn't a hit, but it was legitimately a pretty good movie. And certainly, first of all, Blade Runner wasn't a hit. So the fact that the studio, maybe this is a bad example, there's no reason on God's green earth Blade Runner 2049 should have ever been made. And if it was going to get made, it should never have been made at $175 million or whatever it cost. But I'm glad it was made. It didn't make any money, and it had horrible marketing. The reason Blade Runner 2049 got made is a whole different experience, but a whole different thing. Blade Runner is cool. Blade Runner is inherently cool. Everyone loves Blade Runner. You know, it's probably the most emulated movie in terms of looks of any movie ever made. It's amazing, but it made no money. And most people don't love Blade Runner. They don't. People in the film business do. Science fiction fans do. It looks fantastic. The vision of Blade Runner has not aged. It's amazing. But it didn't make any money. So the fact that Blade Runner 2049 was greenlit, it was greenlit because people in Hollywood are bamboozled into thinking Blade Runner is this amazing cult movie that everybody loves Blade Runner. They do, but only the people that you talk to. You go outside, not a lot of people love Blade Runner. But they made it, and Denis Villeneuve did a great job. So let's make Dune. And Denis Villeneuve, Sicario, Prisoners, The Enemy, Incendies. He's a great filmmaker. Arrival. Everything he's made. And if he wants to make Dune, why not? Because Blade Runner 2049, while it didn't make any money, it was a fucking great movie. And it has one, I loved it. It's probably one of the greatest sequels ever made. I know some people don't. I get it. I've heard the reasons why. Actually, Brian Fuller told me, producer Brian Fuller has a really great diatribe about why Blade Runner 2049 is not great. I disagree with him, but I also disagree with the critical drinker. I like Creed, the first Creed, more than he does. But he's not wrong. But anyway, why not make Dune 1 and 2 at the same time? Because they weren't going to spend, that probably would have cost about $300 million to shoot. And nobody was going to ever, they were not going to take that risk. And I would say that's everything wrong with Hollywood, because if they had made Dune all at one time, they would have saved a lot of money. They could have done it. They could have amortized all those costs, and it would have cost, I bet you, they would have saved at least $100 million. At least. Maybe even more. But no one has the guts to do it. And no one wanted to roll those dice and bet on it. Nope. I mean, the funny thing is if you're going to make Dune, make Dune. Go make it. Now, of course, they're going to do Dune Messiah, which they should. Then people will find out, you think Paul Atreides is the story of a white savior? No, it's not. But you'll find that out in Dune Messiah. And I had heard the plan was in the beginning to make 3 Dune movies anyway. Dune, Dune Prophet, and Dune Messiah, where the first Dune book was always going to split into 2. But anyway, they're looking at these, whatever. They're looking at analytics. They're looking at money. They're looking at... It was a dumb idea not to make all of Dune at once and make 2 movies at once. I mean, Warner Brothers kind of did it before, but it didn't work. Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions. And, of course, you got the Harry Potter movies, but again, there was the plan. They already had a plan for them. But so, we as fans have now had to live in a world, especially over the last 10 years, where 2 things are happening. Not only is everyone trying to inject DEI into everything, which I understand. I want to hear voices, give people that have been marginalized, that have not told their stories, room to tell their stories. Please give me stories I haven't heard. I'm the biggest advocate of that in the world. And I always go back to Spike Lee's first movie. She's Got to Have It. A black and white movie about what it's like to live in Brooklyn, to be a black woman and have multiple boyfriends. This was so out of the realm of my experience, but I loved it when I first saw it. I loved it. I'm like, this guy, this Spike Lee dude, he's going places. You could tell. And that story, his story, was, you didn't have to say it was DEI. It was a black Brooklyn story. And I loved it. Why? Because it was great. And it was true to itself. And it told me a story I didn't. So what happened there? I don't know. Because we started going on this path where more movies like that got made. Sure, we needed more black filmmakers. We especially needed more black female filmmakers. And we needed more black LGBTQ filmmakers as well. But even that started to happen more and more and more. So bring it on. The problem is that now films and the people making those films, those initiatives and all that have now become such a problem over the last 12 years that everybody wants to make sure that there's all this representation everywhere all the time. And that to me is, again, you're putting your agenda before your characters and stories. Why not encourage all different kinds of people? I don't care, shape, size, color, creed, religion, political affiliation, sexuality, whatever. Encourage those people to make movies. Why isn't Hollywood having those people bring their original unique visions to the screen? Tell us new stories. Oh no, like Alex Kurtzman points out, we're going to take Star Trek and we're going to use it to impart the messages we think that you need to hear. And this, by the way, is the root, the 2 roots of all of the problems that have given rise to the anti-fans. The 2 things. One is the corporate ownership of our storytelling. Because corporations, by definition, are not storytellers. They are not. And they do not know how to find effective storytellers. Because if you're not, a corporation does not look, they don't analyze stories and and they don't know. A corporation doesn't know what makes one story good and one story bad. They can look at analytics and go, if we have these elements, we'll make a great story. But that's like saying to somebody, that's like saying to a chef, if you give a world-class chef 10 ingredients, they will probably make you an amazing souffle. But if you give those same 10 ingredients to a corporation, they won't know fuck all what to do with them. That's part of the big problem with what's happened to our IPs. And also, it's not just the stories that are being told, it's the money that's being spent, because stories now are not for the local markets, they're global. And corporations, not only do they not know how to tell stories, they also want to maximize their profits. So when you have something that's inherently a story, that if your product is a story, it's kind of a bummer that your corporation isn't, they themselves aren't storytellers, that you have to outsource your storytelling, which you do because a corporation doesn't know how to do that. And so, and then they look at spreadsheets and they look at ingredients, but that doesn't mean that the people they're hiring or the people that they're going after know how to cook. They don't know how to cook. And this is a huge, huge problem, where before, a movie studio was not worried about that because they weren't spending that much money. It's like, hey, we're going to take Hunt for Red October. It's going to be $30 million. We got John McTiernan coming off of Die Hard. We got a young Alec Baldwin. We got Sean Connery. We got a great cast of actors. And we got Tom Clancy's banger of a book. That's all you needed. That's what you got. And then you had talented filmmakers get together to make the movie that the studio hired them and said, you go forth. Paramount said, go forth and do your thing. You know, there was no messaging other than what Tom Clancy had to say, you know, and John McTiernan and Jan de Bont and all the people that made that movie, Basil Polidoris' score, shout out to Basil Polidoris. I mean, they all made a great film. And the studio got it. They marketed it. It was a hit because it didn't cost $200 million. And the thing is, they don't do that anymore. That whole thinking is gone. And the reason that so many of our franchises, they bought these franchises, the reason people are mad and the reason anti-fandom has risen is because we are getting shitty stories. And the thing is, we as fans know that there's all these great stories out there that exist. I mean, for instance, we all know that Sheev Palpatine was resurrected in the 1991 comic series Dark Empire. We saw it. Why? Because we read it. Why? Because there hadn't been much Star Wars around, and they released the Thrawn trilogy, and they released Dark Empire, bringing back bringing back Star Wars to the fan base that embraced it. Everyone bought those books. If you were a Star Wars fan, people bought Heir to the Empire. You didn't even have to be a Star Wars fan. It was a big publishing deal. Grand Admiral Thrawn, you know, all the characters come back. And then there was the Dark Empire comic. Not as many people knew about it because they didn't read comics. But you had Palpatine resurrected, clones of Palpatine. He was already resurrected. So we knew how that story could play out and be good because we saw it done already. What we wonder, as fans, is why the fuck doesn't the company that bought Star Wars know it? Why do they hire a guy like J.J. Abrams, who everything's falling apart? We'll bring Palpatine back. Wait, what? And a corporation's like, oh yeah, bring the Emperor back. Why not? Because they don't know any better. They look at J.J. Abrams and like, okay, we trust you. No one at Disney was going, you know, there was already a pretty well-known story in Star Wars lore that we decanonized, but where they brought Palpatine back, and the comic's pretty good. Like, it's called Dark Empire. There was Dark Empire 2. You know, you can get the hardcover collection of it, the comics. You can read the comics. And they really brought Emperor Palpatine back really well. So why not go do that then? And I guess you got to make it work. There was nobody. Disney said that. There was probably nobody at Bad. Oh, there was somebody at Bad Robot because they rip stuff off all the time from people. They just do it badly. So we as fans who've been following this stuff are supposed to accept the crawl. I hated Rise of Skywalker from literally the first words, "The dead speak!" Exclamation point. I was fucking out. I was out. I'm like, the people that made this movie are fucking dumb. They're dumb. And I'm an anti-fan, and I can sit there and bitch about, you know why I'm an anti-fan? Because they are dumb, and they did dumb things. That's dumb. You're taking a great something that began in 77 and 80, which with two of the great fantasy films ever made, and you're starting out the last one, the ninth one that ends this whole saga, The Dead Speak. What the fuck? Fuck you. Seriously. Fuck you. Because what the fuck? The dead speak. And then Palpatine comes up. What the fuck? What? And of course, I mean, I feel that way about the entire sequel trilogy. But it's like, you people are expecting us who have grown up, who have lived and breathed this stuff. You could have called anyone randomly. Any Star Wars fan, you got their name and address at a Star Wars celebration. You could have called any fan of Star Wars that had been a fan. I don't know. You could have called an 8-year-old Star Wars fan and said, "Hey, Christy, do you like Star Wars?" "Oh yes, I like Star Wars. I love Princess Leia." "Well, we want to bring Sheev Palpatine back." "No, that's a dumb idea. Sheev Palpatine died in Return of the Jedi. Why would you do that?" An 8-year-old girl could have told you that bringing Sheev Palpatine back the way they did was fucking dumb. These motherfuckers have $200 million to make a movie. They have Disney behind them. They had all the suits, all the people that are supposed to know better. They signed off on that shit. In what universe do people that are getting paid a lot of fucking money to know their jobs? Why are they serving this up to us? Because you know what? It ruins their brand. It ruins their brand. They're destroying the very thing that they're trying to make, which is the ironic part of all of this. It's bad. It's bad. Now, I know you might like Rise of Skywalker, but demonstrably, if you wanted to like sit down with anybody that really understood story and all, you could like maybe not have horses riding across a Star Destroyer. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But these people should know better. And we as fans, when somebody gives this to us, it's insulting to us. It's insulting to the audience. An audience that's grown up with this stuff. An audience that's read all this stuff. Played your video games. Bought your action figures. Listened to your soundtrack albums. Your IP colonized our brain decades before you even owned it. And you come along and fuck it up. And you're incredulous as to why we're angry or why we're mad. These aren't just movies. These are actually part of our lives. We're clocking I was 10 years old when I saw Star Wars. I was 13. I just got bar mitzvahed when I saw Empire. I was in high school when I saw Jedi. You know, my life can be tracked by Star Wars. Part of that was when Heir to the Empire came out and when I read the Dark Empire comics. You know, so Star Wars has been a thing in my brain, rightly or wrongly, for a long time. And it's meant something to me. The characters mean something to me. And I haven't even got to Star Trek yet. Or Doctor Who. Or James Bond. Take your pick. It's all of these corporately held franchises. And George R.R. Martin, I love you. But nobody wants to sit there and gloat over failure. Nobody wants to sit there and laugh at failure. But now it's gotten to the point where we can only laugh because it's so pathetic. Because the amount of money that's being spent, the amount of talent that's being squandered, and the thing is, the people at the top that should know, it's amazing. The people that are running the studios don't know how to make movies. They don't. They never made movies themselves. And now they're running movie studios. And they're wondering why their stock price is plummeting. You know, when I was working at Warner Brothers with Bill Young, I was a management trainee for the senior vice president of physical production. Do you know how he became the senior vice president of physical production at Warner Brothers? Because he was a production manager on productions for decades before he worked at Warner Brothers running their physical production. Here was a man that cut his teeth as a production manager of movies and television. He knew how to make movies, so he ascended the ranks and he became the senior vice president of physical production, overseeing the making of all movies Warner Brothers made. I worked for that guy, and he knew his shit. That's why he had his job. So people are they don't know. And we as fans, now we have a platform, we have YouTube. But it isn't going to get any better, you know? And being an anti-fan is it's almost like, think of it as, I'll put it in terms of maybe people can understand if they know movies. They're Howard Beale. Oh, I forgot. Nobody who works in Hollywood anymore knows who Howard Beale is. I'm sure many people don't recognize the name, but maybe somebody might recognize Patty Chayefsky, and maybe somebody might recognize the movie Network, which is still a banger of a movie. And Howard Beale said, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore." That's what we as anti-fans are. We are, all of us, Howard Beale. And it used to be, because I know when I was a kid, I loved everything. Like George R. R. Martin said, I'd go to conventions. Everything was exciting. Everything was amazing. Books, everything. Nothing insulted our intelligence. Nothing sucked. It didn't. Even when it wasn't that good, okay. But there was a monster in it. There was a spaceship in it. I'd watch it. There was something I could find. But nowadays, I watch Rise of Skywalker. I watched it once. I own it. I bought the Skywalker Saga box set on 4K, the 4K disc Disney put out. So Disney, you got my money. I will never watch that film again. Ever. Not because it's not out of spite, but there's nothing in it that I like. There's nothing in it that makes any sense, and I don't, even when Harrison Ford shows up at the end, it's like, or at the middle, I don't like it. I don't like it. People are mad I screamed in their headphones. I'm sorry. But that's the problem. We have all these people, all these talented people that don't know what's good or bad, and at the same time, they're trying to preach to us at the same time. They're trying, like, when Alex Kurtzman said in an interview that he was using Star Trek as to get the message out. I'm like, wait a minute. Are you a prophet? Have you come down from the mountain with your 2 stone tablets? Is there a burning bush that you're... What gives you the right to think you have a message I need to hear? Who are you? I mean, I've been watching Star Trek a lot longer than you've been making it, buddy. And clearly, judging by the drivel that you've turned out since 2017, well, actually, I'll take you all the way back to 2009 because you co-wrote that movie too. I've been insulted. I've become an anti-fan because of your work. It's your work. And it's not because I'm old or I want... Here's the thing. We like innovation. We like something new. What we like is something good. That's what we want. We want something innovative. We want to know that the people that are making the entertainment that we love actually have, I don't know, learned something about the property before they made it. Like, you know, how about that? How about, like, if you're going to bring us, I understand Grand Admiral Thrawn, I understand. But, like, I did a story about this before. Timothy Zahn, who created Grand Admiral Thrawn, they were already down the road before they even called him up, and they said, hey, can we use your character? Is it okay? What if he said no and threatened to sue the studio? He didn't, but what if he did? So, anti-fandom is not about misogyny. It's not about racism. It's not about bigotry. It's not about any of those things. Now, sure, people use all kinds of spicy language. And I am not my brother's keeper. And I can't tell people how they should speak. And a lot of people are bawdy. A lot of people are off color. A lot of people are mean. But the roots of it are because we are being treated badly by the creators of things that we used to love. And maybe it's not even the creators. It's the corporations that own them. I don't blame Kathleen Kennedy for Star Wars. I blame the higher-ups at Disney that have mandated certain things that she has to implement. Now, of course, you know, I'm sure perhaps, I'm a huge Kathleen Kennedy apologist and fan. Now, before I get back into this, I'm gonna catch up with some super chats because I have a big article I want to read too. If you all, and I've got letters from you guys. So, first of all, let me just take a gander at some of the super chats that have been coming in that I haven't seen. So, Scott Edwards says, "Who do you want on the new Avengers team?" At this point, I don't know. I've been spending the day. I've been putting stuff. I've been moving stuff out because I had to make room for Elizabeth, so you can't really see it. But above these bookcases, there's one more shelf, and then there's on top. It's all like Hot Toys boxes and action figures boxes stacked up to the ceiling, and I was putting my Avengers Hot Toys boxes from Avengers 1, and I was thinking that very thing all day long. I've been pondering, and I'm like, who are the Avengers? Like, Wanda's turned, you know, she's gone she's heel. She's gone the heel turn. Doctor Strange was never an Avenger. I mean, he was he worked the Avengers, but he wasn't on the team. Professor Hulk isn't really the kind of, I guess he would be an Avenger. Shang-Chi, he's never worked with a team, so why would he be on the Avengers? You've got Hawkeye. I don't know. I think that the MCU has a huge Avengers problem. I mean, Thor could be on the Avengers, of course, but Thor's a tool that needs to be used by a leader. The real question is not who's on the Avengers, it's who's going to lead the Avengers. Captain Marvel, she's dead in the water. You can't make her front an Avengers team. That's not going to work. I don't know. I don't know who the Avengers is going to be. John Suntress, the great John Suntress of the Word Balloon podcast, says, young fans think because you disagree about liking a film, you also hate the person. Ridiculous. Young fans are too soft and can't handle debate. Yeah, but here's the thing. We need to embrace our young fans because, you know, we need to show them, mentor them, teach them the difference between what's good and what's bad. And, you know, we should never dismiss anybody out of hand. By the way, I agree with you. The whole world's gone soft, and that's what this article is about. You know, when I was growing up, what was really interesting was, for instance, if you were a horror fan, I was a big horror fan. I'd read books about horror. I'm talking like when I'm 10 years old. There was never any time in my mind as a kid that I ever thought to myself, well, I'm not going to go watch the Universal monsters. I'm not going to watch Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera, or as they got Creature from the Black Lagoon a couple decades later. I'm not going to go watch those movies because they're black and white. That never occurred to me. I literally wanted to watch every single horror, science fiction, and fantasy film that was made. Every single one of them. I didn't care. I wanted to see every one. And I understood that those movies were made in the 30s. I mean, the Universal Monsters movies were made in the first 5 years, or the first couple. I think Frankenstein sound had been around for 5 years and then they made it. Like, but I wanted to see it. Nowadays, people won't even watch old movies. So there has been a complete shift in what people will watch. Why? I don't know how that... I honestly don't know why that happened, to be honest. Because for me, fandom as a kid, fandom was about everything. You have to have read books, you had to have seen movies, you had to know a little bit about music, but mostly books, and you had to know history. You would never not watch Day the Earth Stood Still because it was black and white. Day the Earth Stood Still was a really significant science fiction movie, and if you went to a convention or something, you better have seen Day the Earth Stood Still. You know, and all the genres. You better seen a little Earth versus the Flying Saucers. You better know who Ray Harryhausen is. I mean, that was de rigueur. That was par for the course. So you had to know. But anyway, but I agree with you. But we got to keep the young kids. We got to help them. Got to help everybody. I had people that helped me. I had people show me wholly inappropriate movies. Shout out to Bud Warner and Steve Pitcher. I don't know what happened to you guys, but hey, man, I got to see I Drink Your Blood because of you. I got to see Texas Chainsaw because of you. I got to see They Came From Within because of you guys. But your bootleg videotapes, I saw so many things I wasn't supposed to see. It was fantastic. But you wouldn't show me Solo. You guys did have... That was where you drew the line. Gore was fine, but you didn't show me Solo as much as I begged. Red French Moon says, by what you said, what did hurt a franchise more, Ghostbusters 2 or Obi-Wan? For me... I still like Ghostbusters 2. Obi-Wan is an insult. Was made cheap. It's sad. Well, I would say this. I don't think that Ghostbusters 2 is... I think it's a far inferior movie to Ghostbusters 1. But it's still pretty good. Like, it's not embarrassing, and you still have the key components that made the movie. It's just... It doesn't work as well as, I mean, this is funny to say. This is so funny to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I hope people understand this when I say this. Ghostbusters 1 has verisimilitude. Ghostbusters 2 does not. Ghostbusters 2, I mean, and people are going to be like, wait, what? When you look at Ghostbusters 2 compared to Ghostbusters 1, in Ghostbusters 1, they don't know they're in a Ghostbusters movie. If that makes any sense. They don't know. And the ghosts are funny. The situations are funny, but it's because those guys are who they are. Egon and Spangler, you know, Zeddemore. Those guys are, and they're who they are. And by the time you get to Ghostbusters 2, they're like the Ghostbusters. So it's already, we know the goof fest, but in Ghostbusters 1, they're kind of trying to take this whole thing, even when it's like, are you a god? No. I mean, even that answer, it was funny, but it's what he would have said. Ghostbusters 2, not a lot of verisimilitude. I know it's a funny, weird thing to say, but if you go back and you watch them, especially back to back, it becomes very apparent. I would say this. Star Wars and Empire, for me, have great verisimilitude. Return of the Jedi does not. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I can elaborate more, but I'll give you some examples. R2 and 3PO head down in the sand getting picked up. I'm done. I'm out. What are you doing? When R2 and 3PO go up to Jabba's palace and knock on the door, even the lighting in that scene's terrible. And the things like, goodness gracious me, Gamorrean guards, no verisimilitude. Just saying. If that makes any sense. Joey Hamilton. How are you, Joey? Analytics have proven effective in the NFL, except for the Bills because we're cursed. For decades, coaching decisions were go with your gut was as fine an explanation for seemingly poor judgment. Analytics people were disparaged as being nerds, but lately coaches are starting to embrace analytic decision-making. What is the difference between analytics applied in sports and movie making? That's a very, very, very good question. I will tell you this, because I've seen Moneyball 100 times. Looking at statistics in sports and looking at people's performance in sports is quantifiable. You can look at and how it leads to results. You're talking about things like gaining yards or runs, RBIs, or these kinds of things, and compare and contrast. Those things matter, as we saw in Moneyball. Thank you, Billy. And that is not true, because you can't apply those same analytics, because there's cause and effect in sports. But in movies and stories, what is the cause and effect? As I said, you can have the same ingredients and you give it to a bunch of different people, you're going to get a different result. And I think that storytelling, understanding, there's so many different variables. They'll look at the analytics and they'll have, you need these ingredients to make a successful movie. And that might be true, but unless somebody knows how to put them together in the correct way, and the same is true for a team as well. But if you're looking at analytics, you can actually, when it comes to things like statistics, it's much easier. I mean, somebody either performs or they don't, and they're performing at a certain level, so that can be charted. So analytics, Moneyball proved that approach to sports worked. I mean, again, it has to be applied correctly, though. Kelvin Wellborn, our friend Kelvin, says Doctor Who Bulletin was the anti-fan magazine in the 80s. It attacked the producer and the star. It forced BBC attempt to cancel the show. It forced the BBC to attempt to cancel the show and sack the star. Well, here's the thing. No one should ever attack an actor, because an actor is just doing what they're told to do. And I think in the age of IP, it's Disney, the corporation, that is to blame for the ills of the MCU and the ills of Star Wars. It's not Kathleen Kennedy. It's not Kevin Feige. Look, Kevin Feige was doing great until Disney came along and said, oh, we're going to start our streaming service. And our streaming service, the only thing that we have for people are these two great IPs. So you people that are making this stuff, now you have to make 6 different shows for Disney Plus every year, in addition to doing the movies that you're making. And they expected nothing to change. That was dumb. While, I mean, the whole thing, like Disney Plus, I get it. But the Star Wars franchise worked best on the big screen. And now you're making it into a TV show. I mean, yeah, the Clone Wars was great, but now you're doing this hybrid thing and all. But I think in answering the question about Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan tried to fit a square peg into a round hole, in that we know when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master, only a master of evil, Darth. What did they want to do? They wanted to put Obi-Wan Kenobi and Vader and make them fight multiple times. Well, we're looking at it going, that's not what happened. Again, there's a novel called Kenobi. Why not go adapt that? You own it. It's already there. Actually, it's a pretty good novel. It was a lot better than and then someone's like, okay, we're gonna make a movie about Kenobi, but wait. Let's put little Princess Leia in it. Why? I mean, you have a man who's lost his faith, lost his Jedi order, has lost everything, and all he has, the only hope that he has, is Luke Skywalker. Overseeing and then you give him something else to live for. You give him a quest. You give him a side story that makes him leave his post, essentially. That's enough. You don't need Vader. You don't need Princess Leia. They shoehorn that shit in there. And that compromised the story you're going to tell. It became fraudulent. And it was never going to work. Once they made those choices, I mean, the movie's called Kenobi. You know what you look at? You look at a fucking Japanese samurai movie. What does a masterless samurai do? Hell, dude, make Lone Wolf and Cub. Shogun Assassin, yo. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, it's just, or you don't have to do Lone Wolf and Cub, but anything like that. Do what George Lucas did. Couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, so I'm going to look to the east. I'm going to look to, or in the case of California, you just go farther west. I'm going to look to Samurai. That's what Lucas did. I mean, Obi-Wan's an embarrassment. Obi-Wan damaged the brand more than Ghostbusters 2. I don't think Ghostbusters 2 did damage the brand. I think Obi-Wan did. I think most of what Star Wars has. The problem is Star Wars is now only about itself. It's so far up its own ass that it has nothing to say to the audience anymore. We're following plot, and the what does it mean? I mean, here's what has been forgotten about Star Wars. I'll make it very simple. We, meaning the audience, all of us are Luke Skywalker, male and female. Luke Skywalker is us. When Luke Skywalker is looking at those twin setting suns of Tatooine, and you hear the French horn, when you hear that theme, we've all been there. You know, we're all sitting on the farm going, when the fuck am I going to get out of here? You know, that's what that movie's about. And we all get it. And then what is Empire got going on for it? Our boy Luke, who is us, has to learn from a teacher. Somebody that has something to tell you about the world. You think you know everything. Oh, you don't, do you? Look at me, judge me by my size, do you? For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. You didn't even think I was a Jedi Master, you stupid kid. Because you don't know fuck all. Like all of us. That's why Star Wars works. That's why Empire works. And to a certain extent, Jedi. Even though I think Jedi should be 100% better than it is, the opening is great and the closing is great because it takes that Luke story, it puts us in the same position that we're in Jedi and Star Wars. We are Luke Skywalker. Who am I in Ahsoka? And it's not because I'm an old white man. It's because I'm looking at, I don't even know what that show is about. I kept waiting. I mean, I've seen Ahsoka go through all this before. I'm watching Ahsoka. I'm like, what is going on here? What does anybody want? Why is Grand Admiral Thrawn hanging out on this planet? If you have a whole galaxy, why don't you go check it out? Why don't you go take it over? I mean, what is that show about? I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, we're flashing back to the Clone Wars now. Why are we doing that? Just to show the Clone Wars? Am I supposed to go, oh, look, Clone Wars? I mean, don't get me started. Tom Jr. Jackson says, I watched Run Silent, Run Deep tonight, and that movie did not disappoint. There was a scene that inspired a scene from Wrath of Khan in it. Watch it yet? Oh, yeah, I've seen Run Silent, Run Deep. And a long time ago, but I didn't remember. But yes, I watched the new disc. It's great. That movie's great. It also inspired Crimson Tide. They talk about it. It's great. Kenneth Crayley Jr. says, don't put your agendas before your story. Also, enough of deconstructions of great hero characters like Superman, Clark Kent, and Luke Skywalker on film. Well, that's another thing. I mean, this deconstructing characters is great. Unforgiven. Unforgiven is the granddaddy. If you want to deconstruct a character, watch Unforgiven. What that movie does is it deconstructs Clint Eastwood's entire Western persona and indeed the Western genre as a whole. And it's a great movie to boot. It's so good. That movie is so good. But nobody knows how to... The problem is this. The problem is, why are they deconstructing characters? I mean, with Unforgiven, you have a great story. You have a great story that also deconstructs. And it doesn't just deconstruct the Western genre. It deconstructs a lot of things. When Richard Harris is giving his diatribe about why no one kills a king, but people can assassinate a president. I mean, that's it all works together. The Duck of Death. Unforgiven's a genius movie. And anybody who wants to deconstruct a character, which I don't mind, you can always deconstruct anybody. Watch that movie. But they didn't. The problem with the deconstruction of the characters is the reason they're doing it. The reason they're doing it. And you know, I don't want to get into a big argument about or have people scream and yell at me and go, oh, but they'll scream and yell at me. You know why they deconstructed those characters? Because it's time for a new regime. A new group of people need to come and take over and represent the diversity of the galaxy. And that's fine too. I don't mind that. But why do you have to do it at the expense of other characters? I mean, you made everybody stupid. Han Solo's stupid in Force Awakens. He doesn't have the Millennium Falcon. He lost it. I mean, it's been sitting in the desert somewhere, and Han Solo doesn't know where it is. He left Leia. He left his son. He's a deadbeat dad. Everything about Han Solo in Force Awakens is he's a dick. He's just a stupid douche. And the whole thing in Star Wars is they play the fact that he's a douche. But he's not really a douche. Han Solo would never abandon Leia, and he would never leave the Millennium Falcon. And it was just, they just wanted to do that and create stupid drama because the rest of their story sucked. So they did that. It was terrible. And same thing with Luke. I mean, give me a break. And again, it goes back to the fact that we already got all these great stories post Return of the Jedi. You can read them. I know they were in books and all that, but they were great. They were awesome. Terrible stuff. Brian Erdy sends in a $50 super chat. Wow, dude. That's very kind of you. Here's what Brian has to say. By the way, this is his third super chat on a live stream. Brian Erdy says, I did the Rise of Skywalker junket. I didn't know it then, but Rise would be my last junket thanks to COVID. Had I known that, I wish I had spent my one-on-one time with Abrams telling him how and why he fucked up two of my favorite franchises. Amen. And he truly did. He truly did. The reason that Star Trek 4 isn't getting made is because he oversaw 3 Star Trek movies that were way too expensive. Star Trek, another thing. J.J. Abrams comes in and I need $175 million to make a Star Trek movie. Why the fuck? In what universe do you think you need that much money? What precedent do you have to make that much? It was a huge mistake. Here's another thing that people don't understand. Star Trek as a franchise, the fact that Star Trek the Motion Picture is said to cost $44 million in 79 is a misnomer. I'll say it again. They had to roll in all the development costs for Star Trek Planet of the Titans, which never got made. Philip Kaufman's Star Trek movie, Star Trek Phase 2 never got made. All that had to get rolled in, and that's why the budget was as high as it was. And they were locked into a release date, so they had to spend a lot more money working overtime. But to greenlight a Star Trek movie at $175 million was idiocy. And J.J. Abrams, why? Wants to get money. I don't blame him. But it's like if you'd made that movie for $100 million. I mean, that movie is so overdone. It's so overcooked. And it's a pretty shitty movie anyway. I mean, I hate Star Trek 09. I know people like it. The cast, see, what people like is the cast. Because the cast is so, they did, other than, I think that Zachary Quinto's not playing Spock well, but he could have, if people ever understood that Vulcans do in fact have emotions. In that movie, all Spock does have is emotions. But anyway, they could have made that movie for $100 million. There's no reason they had to spend that much money. And that movie is so overcooked. Look, you should be able to make a great Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, shot entirely on location at Paramount on the lot, except the final scene, which they shot at Golden Gate Park of the Spock's torpedo tube. But Brian, I mean, look, if I met J.J. Abrams, I wouldn't launch into a diatribe about how I hated Star Wars and I hated Star Trek that he made. I would sit down and ask him. I'd be very nice, because I don't hate him as a person. I've never met him as a person. I'd be very curious to sit down and have a very nice one-to-one conversation with him. If he knew something about me, which I don't think he would ever know, so it doesn't matter. He wouldn't know what I've said. He might not talk to me because he's pissed at the things I've said. But I'd back it up. I'd love to sit down and ask him about his creative choices. I'd be curious. I'd be nice. I wouldn't be a dick. Or maybe I'd be a dick. I don't know. But I think I'd try to be nice because I'm nice to everybody. When you are TAC sends in a tip. By the way, the tip link is in the description below. if you want to use it. Tax says, you've casually mentioned X-Files a lot recently. I've been a fan for years. Am I the only one who prefers the standalone episodes with them discovering supernatural mysteries over the lore ones? Musings of a cigarette smoking man is still top 5 though. Well, Tack, I would say this. Again, I love the X-Files. Up to a point when it went off the rails, when they realized they didn't know what they were doing. It's obvious, you can see it. But I really love the X-Files for seasons 1 through 4. Bless me. Through 1 through 4. 5, it starts to go off the rails, even though I like things in 6 too. And some of the Doggett and Agent Reyes stuff's good. But I like the standalone episodes like Die Hand Diver Let's. I mean, that's a great. There's a lot of great standalone episodes, but they're mythology episodes beginning after, well, the Erlenmeyer Flask, the last episode of the first season, and then when they go into Little Green Men? The beginning of the second season is where the mythology kicks in. The problem is they hadn't thought their mythology through. So I love the mythology episodes until you realize, oh... because the mythology winds up not making any sense and it gets so convoluted and it literally goes off the rails. It's like the X-Files mythology is like a train, a passenger train that gets derailed and kills 1,000 people. It goes nowhere. And unfortunately, it was a bummer. It really was a bummer. Ross sends in a tip and says, when seeing Captain Marvel in the comics and cartoons, she becomes interesting when she moves toward being an anti-hero or antagonist. I'd be wary that it would turn into an adaptation of Turnabout Intruder. Yeah, I mean, look, I think they did a terrible thing making the Marvels. I think Captain Marvel deserved another standalone story. If it were me, obviously, it would have been really interesting because I think the Marvel Universe, the snap, deserves examination. And it alluded to the fact that the universe was in shambles. I would love to have seen a story about Carol Danvers dealing with a post-snap universe after Thanos had snapped and what was going on in the Galactic Order. You know, whether you go to Xandar or what was left of Xandar or the Nova Corps or whatever, and just dealing with what happened, you know, and have her have some very personal story, but make the stakes like Empire Strikes Back or something. And they didn't do that. And I'm sorry that they didn't, because I didn't think Captain Marvel was great, but I thought it was respectable. I enjoyed it. The sci-fi fan, my 5-year-old sci-fi self would have loved it. Would have loved it. They really would have. And was it great? No. But I thought it was a serviceable science fiction film. It had some interesting concepts, you know, but it wasn't awesome. So what can you do? What can you do? Let's see. Let's continue on here. B-Dep, our friend B-Dep, I still do not know. I'm going to try and call. I forgot to call him. I forgot to call George Feltenstein about Under the Rainbow. I am sorry. B-Dep says, hey, Rob, last week I said modern Hollywood writing is horrible. This corporate DEI is definitely part of that. I've just chosen to just not acknowledge certain things anymore, like the sequel trilogy. I'm with you. But, you know, it's hard when you have liked something your whole life. Like, I'll give you an example. So I don't really buy mainstream comics anymore. But I buy graphic novels from Cheap Graphic Novels. I love Cheap Graphic Novels. It's actually Cheap Graphic Novels on the internet, Cheap Graphic Novels. And I really like dealing with them. Their customer service is good. And they pack their omnibuses within an inch of their lives. So I really highly recommend them. So I bought from Cheap Graphic Novels, I bought the ROM. Yeah, they're collecting ROM. Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema, ROM. So I got ROM, but I got the AEX miniseries, or the omnibus, that I hadn't read, which is the Eternals, the Avengers, X-Men, and Eternals story, Judgment Day. And I got it, and I opened it up, and I read like 100 pages of it today, and I loved it. I love the premise. You know, Druig is in charge of the Eternals, and he's decided that the X-Men, that they've kind of retconned the Eternals, that if there's too much deviation, like the deviants brought down, like it's because of their presence that the mutant gene and all the things that happen on the Earth is because of the deviants, and they've decided that with the Krakoan, the new revolution in mutants, in the Krakoan era of mutants, they've conquered death. That's too much of a deviation, so it's up to the Eternals. They have to exterminate the X-Men. And it's sound reasoning. I'm like, okay. I thought it was a banger. Loved it. I'm like, you know, I didn't read I wanted to read the story. I've been really enjoying the Hickman run on X-Men, the whole Krakoan era. You know, I'm getting the hardcovers, reading through it. I read House of X and Powers of X when it first came out, but then, you know, I just waited for the hardcovers, and I'm really enjoying. I mean, I'm sad that it's Fall of X is happening, but okay, but it's good, and I loved it, and it's really interesting. The story's interesting, and it makes sense. And the Avengers have to stop the Eternals from killing the X-Men. It's pretty good. I enjoyed it. Legion 0129 says, actually, before I get into what Legion says, so B-Dep, I mean, the thing is, we got to let it go because we've had Star Wars. I mean, also, it's time to move on, too, I guess. I mean, if the franchise still was interesting, like to me, this is sad to say, but all of my favorite franchises, I loved the James Bond franchise since I was a little kid. I loved Casino Royale, and to a certain extent, I'm a Quantum of Solace apologist. But Skyfall, Spectre, and No Time to Die killed James Bond for me. No interest. I don't care if they make another James Bond movie. And I've loved James Bond since I was a little kid. If they make another James Bond movie, I'll probably go see it. I have no interest. I think James Bond is a franchise that is over. Could you reboot it and have a new person play James Bond and tell spy stories? Yes. But since 2006, I've watched the Bond franchise go into a tailspin. And they completely went in the wrong direction with it. And No Time to Die, I'm just sitting there watching the end of it going, what the fuck is this bullshit? I hated it. And so James Bond died. Star Wars died. The sequel trilogy killed Star Wars. I'll still watch the shows, but I don't care. It's not appointment television for me because they have nothing to say. There's no, other than Andor. I'm curious to see where Andor goes because that works like a World War II spy movie. It's like a French resistance story. It's a story where it strips the Star Wars universe out of all the... There's no Jedis, there's no lightsabers. It's just the workaday empire and the workaday rebellion. And that's always going to be a great story. So I'll watch that. I'll watch Andor, but the rest of it I don't care. And the MCU, I love the MCU. I'm surrounded with MCU stuff. I mean, you can see these are all down here. They're all Marvel. There's a whole level of Marvel. I'm surrounded by Marvel omnibuses all the way around. I mean, there's got to be $10,000 worth of Marvel omnibuses over the years here. Don't care. The MCU is... I really want to see Wolverine and Deadpool 3 and Wolverine or whatever it's going to be called. It's not an MCU movie. It's an X-Men movie. And while the Fox X-Men franchise was up and down, I mean, I think X-Men 1, X-Men 2, Days of Future Past. I mean, if you want to look at it as a trilogy, and First Class and Days of Future Past. I like half of Apocalypse. I like Wolverine. And I like Logan. And the Deadpool movies. So I'm really excited to see that movie, but there's no MCU. The MCU, I can't believe it. It's like when I love the MCU and then suddenly I realize, oh my God, I've just run off a cliff. And for me, the MCU now, as much as I enjoyed Shang-Chi, I liked Black Widow as a spy thriller, and I liked Eternals as a science fiction movie. I didn't think they were particularly good MCU entries, but I liked them on their own terms. They're fun. But as far as the MCU is going, we got 23 great movies. We got Iron Man to Endgame. And that's all I need. So, it's a bummer. So Legion0129 says, you, Chato, and Gore would make a great streaming trio. 3 wise nerds. Your chemistry was great on George's show. Twitter noticed. Make it happen. We could do that. I mean, I've known Chris for 30 years. I like that idea. The 3 wise. I wonder if we could do that. I mean, that's a really interesting idea. Checkers the Inventor has been a member of the channel for 26 months, and Checkers the Inventor has been a hero. PGS Hero says, did you ever consider these franchises should just be over? Yes, I think you're right. Maybe they've just outstayed their welcome, and it is time for something new. 100%. 100%. I think that you're right. The thing is, though, the corporations that buy them, for them, Star Wars is a product to sell. Here's what I don't get. What I don't get is they have to have noticed, because of analytics, taking it back, to our previous, taking it back to everybody else. I mean, the analytics, they're not the same. You went from Force Awakens was always going to make an exorbitantly large sum of money because it was Star Wars coming back after 10 years and all new characters and situations and all that, and the old characters to boot. But it made $2 billion. Rise of Skywalker was 1.3. I mean, Last Jedi was 1.3. So it really cratered. And what really cratered was, I mean, here's a really interesting thing that I find fascinating about the sequel trilogy. Poe Dameron and Rey, because of their relationship, but none of the other characters had any impact at all. No one. There's no characters. They did not, and that to the fact that Rey and Kylo Ren's the only one that really has any staying power. Even BB-8, nobody gives a fuck. Nobody cares about BB-8 anymore because BB-8 didn't do anything to make him a hero. R2-D2, from the first time you meet R2-D2, from the opening 10 minutes of Star Wars, is a hero. He's carrying the Death Star plans. He's a hero. He's a hero through 6 movies. And you can see the desire. And as Lucas set it up, R2 and 3PO were always supposed to be the storytellers of the Star Wars franchise. That was the thing that they were going to do. And the fact that, of course, J.J. Abrams wanted to make a new robot because he wanted to be able to say, I made this toy and it sells. How's that working out for you? It's not, because nobody cares about BB-8. BB-8, people remember BB-8. They might smile, but BB-8 didn't do anything that made you remember him. R2 fixed the hyperdrive on the Millennium Falcon in Empire. And he set out on the jungle and wastes to find Ben Kenobi. He went out on the hull of Queen Amidala's starship to fix it, while other astromech droids are being blown off. R2-D2 is a hero. What do they do in Force Awakens? They put him under a tarp. That's the dumbest shit ever. Why'd you do that? Because you wanted a new astromech droid to sell toys. That's what you thought you were going to get. But you've got to make your characters do things that make them cool. And I don't think that's understood. So it's wild. I don't know. It's bad news. But yes, I think sometimes franchises should just end. Weston says, on the flip side, I wonder how many creators have been driven to create something awesome after being disappointed by the existing offerings. Maybe we need shitty media to spawn greatness. Ooh, I totally agree. But here's the problem. Hollywood doesn't want to invest in that. I don't understand why Hollywood, there's not a concerted effort. We've seen The Matrix was a new... I give you John Wick. John Wick is a new franchise. John Wick, and it was not a $200 million movie. Lionsgate stoked to have a new franchise in John Wick. John Wick started out as a pretty... You know what? Let's take a gander. I do not know what the production budget. I'm just going to through Google, and let's see what they say, because I don't know. What's the production budget of John Wick? John Wick had an estimated production budget of 20 to 30 million. And John Wick 2 was 40 million. John Wick 3 Parabellum had a budget of 75 million. Okay. Hollywood. Here's an idea. Look for new John Wicks and only spend 20 to 30 million dollars. John Wick is a textbook lesson in how you should cultivate new franchises. John Wick, 4 films. The Continental. You've got Ballerina coming out. 5 films and a spinoff. That's a franchise. How many Indiana Jones movies are there? 5. Over the course of since 1981. Now, despite the fact that Dial of Destiny might not have worked the way we hoped, still a franchise. John Wick is now as vital a franchise as Indiana Jones. And I dare say, if you look at the return, John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum grossed $326.7 million globally on a $75 million budget. Now, here's the thing. If we go by 3 or 4 times how much things cost, 4 times 75 million is 300 million. And that includes marketing and everything. So if you look at it, 326 million, the studio spent, you got to look at how much the studio spent. So let's say that the entire budget was 75 million. Let's just assume that Lionsgate, I'll give them 25 million for marketing. There's probably more than that, but let's just say 25 million for marketing. So they spent $100 million on John Wick 3 Parabellum. It made 326 million. So remember that you cut that in half. So immediately what the studio is going to get is they're going to get 150 million. So there's, let's just say 50 million profit. 50 million profit is not bad. When you think about it, everyone thinks movie studios make a lot more money than they do off the movies they make. But $50 million profit is a healthy profit off of 100 million spent. 75 production, 25 million. They might have spent more probably marketing it, but let's just call it that anyway. That's still a healthy return. You know, that's still, you spend 100 million, you get 50% back on your a 50% return on your spend. That's a good investment. That's what studios should be looking for. The problem is these shareholders, these corporately owned movie studios want more money. Their shareholders want more money. But the problem is the business of movie going or movie making does not yield the same rewards that real estate or something does. Or, you know, Fortune 500 stock does. It doesn't do that. And, you know, a studio should be looking to cultivate new franchises. Franchises, by the way, that are true to themselves. I mean, John Wick, who would have thought? I've never seen one dude shoot so many dudes in the head. And, yeah, I mean, amazing. Why aren't the studios let certain franchises die? But, I mean, and what's funny is they keep making stuff and they're making it bad. It's not good, so it's killing their franchises. Their franchises are being put to death by them. It's lame. It's lame. But yeah, Weston, I hope other creators want to create something. Ria Lavi says, what are the best 2 to 3 TNG episodes in your opinion? That's hard to say, but I can tell you a few of my favorites. I don't know if they're the best. Chain of Command parts 1 and 2, Captain Jellicoe. Those are great. I love, of course, Yesterday's Enterprise. I love, of course, Best of Both Worlds. But those are, to me, gimmicky episodes, whereas Chain of Command's a great Star Trek episode, TNG episode. But, you know, All Good Things is a great episode, but again, it's a gimmicky episode. So, I mean, it's hard to say. I think the Drumhead is a great Star Trek: The Next Generation episode. I really like that, but I don't know in terms of the best. Hard to say for me because it changes all the time. Cara Hughes sends in a super chat. Is that pounds? Is that lira? What is that? Rhea Lavi goes on to say, who has failed worse with Star Trek, Abrams or Kurtzman? Well, I would say Abrams has because he can't get a fourth movie off the ground. And Kurtzman keeps getting to make things or making a Section 30. I mean, okay. Look no further than the way Section 31 was treated in Kurtzman's Star Trek. They have a base. They have ships. They have membership cards. They have special. Everyone knows who they are. Not a very good organization. See, this is what I can't stand. Section 31 was way cool because when it was introduced in Deep Space Nine and Bill Sadler played Sloan, he would just show up as one dude. You don't even know whether Section 31, was he really Starfleet or not? I don't know, but they're so lame. The writing is so lame on Discovery that they made Section 31 like everyone knows where it is. So well, we know where they are. It's so lame. 1001 Johnny says, sorry, Rob, late to the show, but did you see my tips? Yes, sir. I already went through those. I did see them. And I went through them earlier, and you can see them. Darius White sends in a super chat and says, deconstruction comes at the end of a well-constructed genre. But to give that assignment to this era of Philistines is a bridge too far. Love your long-form conversational style. Never, ever change. It's tough because I'm talking to no one. It's a really weird thing to be doing this. It's a really odd, like I prefer like doing midnight musings with Lael and Rita or RM and I like doing things with Dieter, and I like YouTubing with other people too, because I'm just talking into a green light. I mean, I don't know if people think I'm a douchebag. I don't know if people like what I'm saying. It's really weird. I mean, getting tips and super chats is the only thing I know of. It's the only thing I know. Like, am I getting through to anybody? So I appreciate you saying that. Thomas Logan says the true villain of Star Trek. Oh, you mean Star Wars? Is Ryan Johnson. The Last Jedi is a disgrace to Star Wars. Abrams should have ignored it altogether and opened 9 with Luke waking up from a dream. Yeah, but you can't do that. I mean, yeah, I there's cool stuff in The Last Jedi. I just think that the whole all of it is kind of wrong-headed from the get-go. So, yeah, I don't want to relitigate that one. I mean, it's interesting because there's a case to be made. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in Last Jedi. I just don't think it holds together. And, Luke makes no sense. A performing artist says Landscape with Invisible Hands is a low-budget sci-fi film of last year. I'd like your opinion on it. Check it out when you get the chance. I've heard of this movie, and I need to see it. But I haven't seen it. Red French Moon says, can we agree that Léa Seydoux is gorgeous? Oh, yes, we can. I love Léa Seydoux. I think she's incredible. She's great in everything she does. I mean, Kojima picked her in Death Stranding 2. You go. And also, blue is the warmest color. Am I right? That movie, by the way, I know that movie is a devastating, emotional movie for me. It gets me every time. Joe Panora says, I'm a Quantum of Solace apologist. Join the club. By the way, not only am I a Quantum of Solace apologist, but Another Way to Die is one of the great Bond theme songs. Jack White and Alicia Keys. Come on. I don't care what anyone says. That song is a banger. I love it. Checkers the Inventor says, but Rob, did the prequels have much staying power? That's a different discussion, but the thing is, they did come from the creator of Star Wars. I think the story of the prequels is good. The execution is not. But I think there's a lot of people that grew up with the prequels, so there's things in it that those movies don't feel like they feel like they're. You know what the prequels feel like to me? They feel like they're if they were AI generated today, If you went to AI and generated Star Wars movies, they would feel the way the prequels feel. They feel they're not right because George Lucas kind of lost touch with people. It needed the everyman. It's just people don't even talk to each other like real people in that movie. It's really tough. But in terms of staying power, no. I mean, it's just like the original Star Trek looms large, and to a certain extent, Star Trek: The Next Generation. To me, Star Wars, the definitive Star Wars, is Star Wars and Empire. Even Rogue One, which I like, does not. When they clink it up to Star Wars, I never saw that the Battle of Scarif being where they came from. Why are they going to Tatooine? It's so weird. After seeing Rogue One, I'm like, why are you going there? It's why you're looking for Ben Kenobi. Nobody mentions that. Is that like your plan B? Ria Lavi says, do you think a new Star Trek show about Starfleet intelligence, not Section 31, could be good? Set 25 years after the Dominion War ended? I mean, it could be. Yeah. I mean, I like David Mack's Section 31 novels, which they ripped off for Discovery. But, I don't know. I mean, I think that, look, to me, that's all plot. Whatever's going on. You could do any kind of a show in the Star Trek universe. But what I think Star Trek is really about and where it works best is when it is an allegorical action-adventure science fiction show where it examines interesting questions about the human condition in the framework of an action-adventure science fiction show. And I think, like, adding all this, I'd call it gobbledygook, like an intelligence organization, a Starfleet, all that does is it takes away, I think, from... I mean, Star Trek's focus is a crew on a mission to seek out the unknown. And I think people forget. You can take, like it's like watching a cop show. If you're watching, take your pick, Brooklyn Nine-Nine or Hill Street Blues or whatever cop show, and then you're like, well, what if we set a show about military intelligence or about in the same universe? And it's like, well, you could do that and have some tie-in, but really the show that you're watching is a cop show. Star Trek, the original Star Trek, and to Next Generation had a paradigm, and the paradigm was a mixed Earth crew with aliens. Is traveling throughout the universe, seeing what's out there, and learning about the human condition at the same time. The thing is, if you make a show about an intelligence agency, you could do the same thing, but all you're doing is then you're going to have to constantly come up with storylines that are both about, like, it's a CSI show, but then you have to come up with all these crazy reasons for gathering intelligence and mythology. I mean, it's just like would you want to see a story set in Westeros about a cobbler making shoes? I mean, you could do that show. You could do a sitcom set in Westeros where Cersei Lannister is only obliquely referenced. And you could do that, but is that Game of Thrones? And so, yeah. Tom Jr. Jackson says, read any good books you can recommend? Hey, if you haven't read Donna Tartt's The Secret History, I would say that. But right now I'm reading the omnibus for Avengers, X-Men, Eternals. So there's that. Thomas Logan says, The Zone of Interest deserves to win Best Sound and Best Foreign Film. Oh, you know what? I just finished Stephen King's new book, Holly, which is an extension of those books with his favorite detective. And I liked Holly. I thought it was good. I love the bad people. They're very bad in it. Thomas Logan says, The Zone of Interest deserves to win Best Sound and Best Foreign Film. Anatomy of a Fall deserves to win Best Original Screenplay. Barbie wins Adapted. I love Zone of Interest. Best Sound and Best Foreign Film. I could see that. The sound design in Zone of Interest is shattering. It's really crazy. Anonymous says, well, with all these Earth-based anti-heroes, Thunderbolt, Sword, she would come into conflict And especially with Secret Invasion, she'll be like, I can fix this in an hour, but I guess female characters can't truly ever be seen in the wrong. Actually, I would love to have seen that. I think that would be great. Yeah, look, again, I look at Captain Marvel. They could make that character so great. And Brie Larson is an Academy Award-winning actress, despite her persona on in real life and on social media. I don't have a problem with Brie Larson. I think that she was flat as Captain Marvel, but she has to be given some more to play. I think she could play it. I don't think that that they did a good job. I think she needed her Empire Strikes Back or her Road Warrior. If Captain Marvel was Mad Max, she needed her Road Warrior. Ross says, I disagree with you about the sequel trilogy. I thought Force Awakens works, and the studios, if they liked money, should have pursued Reylo as the core through line. I don't think the OC characters should have been exalted. I don't think they were. I think all of it was too half-baked. I mean, having the what is it, the dyad? Is that what it is? That could have been really interesting. But they didn't think it through. That story is not a good story. They just didn't do a good job. I think that you could have done that. I think you're right. But I don't think Force Awakens works because whose story is it? It's Rey's story. But here's the thing. Rey's missing her. They never resolved that. You know, Rey's, they gave this thing, it's Palpatine, whatever it was. I mean, it didn't even make sense. If you're waiting for your parents to come for how many years? Like, they can find you, go into town. Hey, have you seen our daughter? You know, and it none of it worked. The Millennium Falcon, how did it get there? You know, I think that she gets behind the just because you're strong with the Force does not mean you immediately have great skill for something that you've never done before, like fly the Millennium Falcon. She flies the Millennium Falcon in that movie. I know it's a breathless action sequence and it looks really cool. It makes no sense that she can sit behind that ship for the very first time and fly it that way. I'm watching that going, I don't believe this. I don't believe any of that movie. I don't believe any of The Force Awakens. I just don't believe any of it. I mean, literally, how did you get this lightsaber? That's a story for another day. What? Really? I mean, not even like that bounty hunter we ran into on Nora Bantel, you know, whatever. You don't even get something like that? I don't know. Wheat Thin from Portland, Oregon says, I think Trek was at its best when it was building bridges. Kirk and Gorkon, Spock and the Horta, Picard and Captain Dathon, Geordi and his Romulan captor. These are low-budget, dialogue-driven stories. I wanted to ask why Axanar didn't go this route. Well, its conception was Axanar came out of the FASA role-playing game, the 80s FASA role-playing game, and Alec Peters, who wanted to do it, he's a big fan. Like, he loves war, like World War II stuff. He loves Captain America, and he wanted to go the route of like they did the 4 Years' War, which was documented in the Axanar supplements and in the FASA role-playing game. But I agree with you. I think that's what Kirk and Gorkon, Spock and the Horta, Picard and Captain Dathon, that's great stuff. I mean, I would also say Picard and Gul Madred in Chain of Command, or Kira and I forget his name, the Cardassian in Duet. You know, Harris Yulin. Is that Harris Yulin? Do that. I agree. That's when Star Trek is at its best. The World According to Lonza says, I loved Disney. I would assume you mean to say Disney Star Wars. Does that make me less of a true fan? No. It doesn't. It doesn't make you less of it. You can like whatever you want. And you should like whatever you want unapologetically. But understand, though, liking things is different than whether or not things are good. And I would say that, yeah, I like plenty of things that I know aren't very good. I like Hudson Hawk. It's not very good. I like Star Crash. I would debate you whether it's good or not, but most people would say it's not good. I like things. There are things that I like but I know that they're not good. You can like the Disney Star Wars sequels and never apologize for it. But then look at it this way. Have the Disney Star Wars sequels done what Disney hoped they did for the Star Wars brand? You have to always ask yourself, that's the question. Just like, I like the J.J. Abrams movies. Okay. But when they started making the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, they were hoping that Star Trek could become the IP's life would have been extended by appealing to a whole group of young people that weren't yet Star Trek fans. That didn't happen. So I would say that the reason for the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies existing, which was to re-energize a moribund, at least in their minds, IP. And remember, Star Trek hit its zenith in 94 when Next Generation went off the air to huge ratings. Basically, they had pioneered the hour-long dramatic syndicated show. You had Generations coming out with Kirk. It was on the cover of Time magazine. You had Deep Space Nine in its second year, and Star Trek was at the height of its popularity. It's never been that popular since. And these new shows, the people that like them. But in terms of having a general impact on pop culture, they don't, which is unfortunate. So you have to ask the same question about Disney Star Wars. Is the viewership there? Did those Disney Star Wars movies re-energize the fan base? I would say that they didn't, because, and the indicator of that is, are we talking about anyone other than Rey and Kylo Ren? And Adam Driver we talk about anyway because he's Adam Driver. And, Rey is the heroine of this story, but, what did she really do? What Rey needed was a confrontation. I mean, meeting her boyfriend, Kylo Ren, was not a confrontation like we had with the Emperor. If you look at what was going on at the end of Rise of Skywalker, if you want to mirror what was going on in Return of the Jedi, not really the same thing, not really the same stakes. And it was a bummer. So, yeah. What are you gonna do? I don't know. Not great. Not great. So it's tough, but you can like them. I mean, I don't want to tell anybody that they don't. They don't. You should like whatever you want. Never apologize for it. Doc Civil says, Rob, can you enjoy a joke the second time you've heard it, no matter how funny it is? Of course not. That's the problem with spreadsheet producing. Well, I like hearing good jokes told. Like I like watching comedy movies over and over because the jokes are. But when you talk about spreadsheet producing, you're right. You can't produce on a spreadsheet. You got to go with your gut. You got to go with the story that moves you. And it's hard to do. It's very hard to do, actually. 1001 Johnny said, no, I read the tips during the show. I read your tips during the show. I talked about Planet of the Apes. Yes, I did. Darius White says, nice pitch. The cobbler of Flea Bottom. I'd watch it. Let's green light it. Well, they want to make a bunch of spin-offs. The cobbler of Flea Bottom. I'd watch that. So yes, 1001 Johnny, I did read those Your Apes tips, and I talked about the Planet of the Apes movies, and I talked about Escape and Conquest. Patrick Lemire says, just finished your Benchley Jaws novel anniversary show. Did you ever see Blue Water, White Death? It's a 1971 documentary. Same people shot live footage for Jaws. Yes, I did. I did see the what are their names? Why am I drawing a blank on their names? The husband and wife. But yes, I did see that. And that was your 20th super chat. And thank you for that. I very much appreciate it. I think I'm all caught up. I am all caught up. You know what? I was going to read an article for this show, but I'm going to save it and read it tomorrow. and it's about colleges, and I wanted to tie it into the anti-fan. But and really, my thesis is just make better stuff, and you won't see anti-fans. But that would be the most helpful thing to do if you could do that. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Thomas Logan says, give Dave Parker a call for an impromptu Midnight Metal. Well, we were going to do Midnight Metal, but Dave Parker is at a birthday party tonight for Dell, who owns the Dark Delicacies bookstore. So that's very, very cool. And so thank you all for that. And I think I've got everything. I think I've covered everything. So I guess I'm going to end this stream. First of all, I want to say thanks to everybody who was here listening to me. I didn't even get to finish. I was going to tie in why we're at the place that we're at with anti-fandom and where did it come from. But it's a really good article that I will save for tomorrow. I will be back for Let's Get Physical Media tomorrow with Dieter. And I will see you. It's getting cold in here. I will see you then. And I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for moderating. I want to thank all of you for generously supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. I want to thank all of you for just being great. And thanks for subscribing to the channel and liking and all that stuff. We're building the channel, making more content. It's all good. So go enjoy the rest of the rant. Darth Plato says the rant's better than the article. Yeah, it's well, I appreciate that. I do. That's very nice. So on that note, I'll be back tomorrow. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better night.